The 2025 government shutdown will be the longest in U.S. history.
Ooh,
Easy.
this is
Easy,
tough.
yes.
You're going yes?
I'm sorry, I'm not an optimist.
I'm going to go no just for devil's argument's sake here. Let's set the groundwork. As of Tuesday, as you're watching this, the government shutdown will have lasted 21 days. That'll tie it for second place all time with, I think, the 95-96 shutdown
Yes.
under Bill Clinton. And of course, the longest shutdown is under Donald Trump's purview during his first term, December of 2018 into January of 2019. So he could be going for, the top two spots here if you want to talk about legacy building. But Tiana, why do you think this shutdown won't broach the 35 days that we saw during the president's first term?
Well, so I think it's all about incentive structure, right? The blame was very comfortably and arguably fairly put at Donald Trump's feet in the 2018-2019 shutdown. This time around, Democrats are unambiguously the ones who have shut down the government, and they have not given themselves any political cover to get out of it. So the real reason why they shut down the government is because, as we know from all these reports, you have angry, especially these boomer resistance liberals who show up at these town halls screaming at their Democratic congressmen saying, we need you to fight more. We need you to scream at Republicans' faces. Do something. And Chuck Schumer can't actually do anything, so he's shutting down the government. They tried to make it about Obamacare, which is something that 1% of the population thinks is the most pressing issue in the country. They do not care about health care. It is not a top 10 issue. Furthermore, what they want from Obamacare so on the merits, they want to spend an extra $1 trillion over the next decade to help ensure coverage for 2% of the population. So you're sacrificing everyone who works in the federal government, everyone who benefits from the federal government for 2% of the population, which is just a very bad political trade-off. But secondarily, they are the ones who are pulling, they are just doing the inverse of what the Tea Party did under Obama, right? Republicans passed a clean funding bill that would maintain Biden-era spending levels, right? Which I think are way too high, but whatever. Whoever passes the clean spending bill is the one who wins. And Democrats are holding the government hostage in order to overturn something that happened in regular point of democratic order. If they wanted to, again, as I have said a billion times on this show and elsewhere, I think there are very real congressional or constitutional overreaches Donald Trump has made during this term. The first and foremost are the IEEPA tariffs, which is clearly a violation of Article 1 powers, reserving the right to impose import duties. That's Congress's job, not the president's. If you wanted to make it about that and say, hey, Mike Johnson, I know you're blocking all of these votes on overturning the tariffs. You must let us vote on the constitutionality of the tariffs. That, I think, would be noble and good, and then you could make an actual case you are standing up against Trump being, overreaching in his power. Instead, you're doing it over a normal reconciliation bill that was passed without changing any of the procedural rules. That is just called, you're just butthurt about democracy. And so all of this is to say, Donald Trump has we'll see what happens with this Gaza deal, but he's just putting points on the board right now, being an international peacemaker. The split screen of Trump and Egypt, getting back the hostages, bringing potentially, hopefully, solving the Middle East. The split screen is Chuck Schumer yelling about Obamacare. I mean, I would hope for the staffers' sake and for all the federal workers who are not being paid, who if you don't believe that their jobs are important or whatever, go through the normal point of order to do layoffs or to downsize departments. Do not just, while people still have to pay rent and pay their bills, not pay them. Because right now, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are being paid, and the people behind them are not.
What's interesting about this is I was saying that no, this won't end up being the longest shutdown in U.S. history, just to make the argument for, the good of you guys at home and your enjoyment. But I think I've actually talked myself into it at this point. And it's a question of strategy. It's not necessarily a question of optics or actual policies here. Let's talk about a couple of dates. October 18th. No King's Parade here in D.C. and its cities across the country. The White House and Congressional Republicans had sort of circled this as the time for Democrats to give up this fight and fund the government and then engage in negotiations on extending these healthcare tax credits like the White House has been talking about for the last 3 weeks, essentially. And on top of that, a lot of the warnings that the White House and Donald Trump, Caroline Leavitt in particular here, has made over the last 2 weeks about, if Democrats don't vote to do this, then these people are going to be impacted. I'm talking specifically about paying U.S. military service members and food access through either the WIC program or the SNAP program. That's a big one they were talking about on Monday. You don't think you would ever hear Republicans talking about we need to protect funding for SNAP, right? What year are we living in? And the White House keeps, covering up these errors, essentially. They've bailed out the WIC program, pulling tariff revenue from the IEEPA tariffs. The president signed an executive order last week ordering DOD to just find money, which they're pulling from the R&D department, essentially, to make sure that military members don't miss their paychecks. They're probably going to do a bailout of the SNAP program if you connect the dots and follow through on their patterns here. And then on top of that, they're starting to recall some of these furloughed employees to conduct services and put out information that the government usually puts out on a monthly basis.
Put out a makeshift CPI report 5 days before the federal
because
Reserve
they
meeting
need those numbers to keep up their messaging and essentially to, yes, move the federal board to continue lowering interest rates, but to assure private sector business leaders and investors, all these people who are critical to this big Trump economic revival that we've heard about for 9 months, if they get cold feet at the end of the year because the U.S. government isn't putting out economic data, that's going to ruin everything for the Trump administration. So I view
it third world stuff, not getting government authorized economic data.
Exactly. So I view right now the Democrats as having nothing to lose. The Republicans, the White House, they've thrown basically everything they can at the Democrats from a messaging standpoint to try to move them off this position, which, to be quite frank, I kind of agree with the White House when it comes to sequencing and timing and still addressing these expiring tax cuts. But the Democrats have the White House over the barrel because for the first time in President Trump's second term in office, they have presented a united front. You don't have any cracks other than John Fetterman, who, let's be honest, his brain might be a bowl of oatmeal at this point in time. Sorry, John. You got to do better for the people of Pennsylvania, though. And I don't think...
As he's recovering from brain damage, he's becoming more conservative.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Which is proof that that's what happens when your brain heals.
No, but
you become more right-wing.
The reason this won't go beyond 35 days, just like the Republicans had looked at October 18th as a big milestone, the Democrats are looking at November 1st. And that is when open enrollment begins, and people are trying to decide, how do I sign up for health care based on these expiring tax credits, right? I think at this point in time, despite what Donald Trump is saying, despite what Caroline Leavitt is saying, Republicans are very worried about how the shutdown will play in the midterm elections. Had you asked me a month ago, will people still care about the government shutdown come next November, I would have said no. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, who's winning the messaging battle, I would have said, well, based on the polling, it kind of looks like the Republicans are winning, or that they're at least holding, and based on history, which tells us that, one, Republicans generally bear the blame for the shutdown because they are the party that wants to limit the government, and two, Republicans, especially when they are in control of the White House and both majorities in Congress, bear the full responsibility for the shutdown in the public's eye. I don't think they can deal with another flip in the messaging salvo come November when Democrats can say, hey, we tried to do this, the White House wouldn't bend, and now you have to make a decision because they flip it back on the White House. It's different when it's 3 weeks ago and it's some imaginary date down the line, right? But when people are actually making decisions about how to spend their income and take care of their own health and the health of their loved ones, that's a big problem for this White House. And I think it's something that they just don't want to deal with. So if we get to November 1, that'll be 30 days of the shutdown. I expect something to be resolved by then. And just look at Kevin Hassett, CEA chief over at the White House. He goes on CNBC Monday morning and says, I think we're actually going to get it done by the end of the week. And that's different than what he had said the last 2 weeks. I trust Kevin, to a degree, to at least be a temperature check for what the White House is thinking.
Oh, yeah.
So therefore, I think there's no way this goes beyond the 35 days.
Can I just say,
Please.
It's remarkable to me that the year kicked off with like the left-wing energy was free Luigi
Mangione.
We love Luigi Mangione, this dude who is famous for literally no other reason than murdering United Healthcare CEO. And the year is ending for the left with please bail out the insurance companies, because that's all the ACA subsidies are.
Yeah.